Well, it's been a remarkable day as far as India and China are concerned. You can see the image over there of the Prime Minister with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. The first meeting of the two leaders in 5 years. Let's quickly listen in to what they both said before we break it down for you on the significance of the day.
आपसे मिलकर खुशी है और जैसा आपने कहा 5 साल के बाद हमारी फॉर्मल मीटिंग हो रही है। हमारा मानना है कि भारत और चीन के संबंधों का महत्व केवल हमारे लोगों के लिए ही नहीं, लेकिन वैश्विक शांति, स्थिरता और प्रगति के लिए भी हमारे संबंध बहुत अहम है। एक्सेलेंसी, सीमा पार पिछले 4 वर्षों में उत्पन्न हुए मुद्दों पर बनी सहमति का हम स्वागत करते हैं। सीमा पर शांति और स्थिरता बनाए रखना हमारी प्राथमिकता रहनी चाहिए। म्यूचुअल ट्रस्ट, म्यूचुअल रिस्पेक्ट और म्यूचुअल सेंसिटिविटी हमारे संबंधों का आधार बने रहना चाहिए। आज इन सभी विषयों पर बात करने का अवसर मिला है। मुझे विश्वास है कि हम खुले मन से बातचीत करेंगे और हमारी चर्चा कंस्ट्रक्टिव होगी।
Mr. Prime Minister, it's my great pleasure to meet you in Kazan. It's the first time for us to have a formal meeting in 5 years' time. Both the people in our two countries and the international community are paying great attention to our meeting. China and India are both ancient civilizations, major developing countries, and important members of the global South. It's important for both sides to have more communication and cooperation, properly handle our differences and disagreements, and to facilitate each other's pursuit of development aspirations.
Prime Minister Modi met with President Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the 16th BRICS summit. This meeting happened, as you are all aware, close on the heels of the disengagement and patrolling agreement and the resolution of issues that had arisen in the India-China border areas in 2020. Naturally, the two leaders welcomed the agreement reached between the two sides through sustained dialogue over the last several weeks in diplomatic as well as military channels.
The Kazan declaration has been accepted, the BRICS declaration has been accepted, and the leaders have said that the summit, they have reiterated the importance of further enhancing the BRICS solidarity. Now, this was the first time where the new members had also joined the BRICS summit, and this has made the summit, this has made the BRICS even more stronger. They have talked about BRICS solidarity and cooperation based on mutual interest and key priorities. PM Modi also has said during the intervention that the decision should be taken by consensus, and of course the older members, the founder members' views should be respected, and that is also one point. There has been talk about local currency, usage of local currencies. There is a conversation going about that, and they have also talked about strengthening the multilateralism for a more just and democratic world order. We have known that the Global South has felt not heard, and India has been taking a leadership in that as well, and Global South is represented amply here in BRICS summit. So that too is a very important development where the BRICS declaration talks about it, about the potential of these BRICS countries which are from Latin America, Asia, Africa, and of course Russia and China are here. So this is also a very important point. One important point regarding the present situation which BRICS declaration talks about is respect of human rights, because the two wars are going on, and the declaration also talks about respecting the human rights in any sort of situation, in such situations, and it also talks about finance and helping each other. So this is a wide document. This is a very well-rounded document. But the most important part is Russia has been able to give a message to the rest of the world that it is not isolated, because more than 24 countries leaders were here, more than 32 countries delegations were here. So this is one of a success for President Putin as far as the isolation accusations or presumptions go.
All right, so a huge development as far as India and China are concerned. Joining us now, Dai Kai, a CGTN reporter in Kazan. Thanks very much, Dai, for being with us. Could you give us a sense of the optimism on the Chinese side on what has been achieved in this bilateral talk between India and China?
That's right. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Chinese President Xi Jinping, they meet here and they talked during a bilateral meeting here in Kazan during the BRICS summit. And this actually is symbolic because this marks the formal meeting between the two leaders since 2020. And during the meeting, the two leaders agreed that, the differences on boundary-related matters should not affect their cooperation. The talks were referring, of course, as you mentioned, the year-long military standoff between the two neighbor countries after their troops clashed along the line of actual control. So from Chinese side, we're all happy to see that, of course, because the two neighboring countries, that a mutual beneficial relationship, it's important for both sides. And the two leaders, of course, agree that a stable bilateral relations between China and India will have a positive impact on regional and global peace and prosperity.
All right, Dai Kai, CGTN reporter in Kazan, covering this very important visit. You're part of a historic process over there. Thanks very much for being with us, Dai. Thanks very much indeed. But let me just, bring our viewers an up-to-date sense of where we were and where we are now. So let's just talk about the areas which have been an area of real concern. Let's bring up the map that we are talking about. So this is Ladakh. This is the line of actual control, marked in red, between India and China. Of course, India claims and continues, obviously, to claim all of Aksai Chin. The boundary that you see over here is what is our ultimate claim line. But the line of actual control which exists is the red line over here. And that is where Chinese soldiers, from approximately 1959 onwards, it started making claims. Then, they'd come in 1962. Then there was a partial withdrawal from some of those areas in 1962. And that is roughly where the two sides are divided. But even this line is not a formal line. It's based largely on, what you see here is largely based on Indian claims. And those Indian claims in all of these areas, Debsang, Galwan, Hot Springs, Pangong, Demchok, many other areas, are based on India being able to patrol certain areas. They're called patrolling points, and they represent the furthest edge of what India sees to be our claim line in each of these areas. After the clashes took place in Galwan, and this is Galwan over here, and we'll bring you images of Galwan hopefully in the next couple of minutes and in what happened over there. All of these areas saw the Chinese block Indian soldiers from getting to our patrol points, particularly over here in Debsang, where the Chinese came into our area, our claim lines, and prevented our soldiers from patrolling to areas where they patrolled in the past. That was also the situation elsewhere. Demchok is one area in the south near the Himachal Pradesh boundary. But in a couple of areas, namely in Galwan itself, where there were those clashes which resulted in the death of several Indian soldiers, also Chinese soldiers, in Hot Springs and in Pangong, there were disengagement zones which were created, which were in fact buffer zones. Now, what exactly are buffer zones? Well, the soldiers of both sides, as a result of agreements, they went back a certain number of kilometers, and the area in between, which is and remains disputed, was where soldiers of no side would actually enter, and any structures which had been built over there by either side were being removed. So this would deconflict the immediate situation, and we saw that happening over here in the Pangong Lake. Now, this particular area between something called Finger 4, which is a geographical feature, and Finger 8, which lies further over here, has largely been a zone with soldiers from either side have not been patrolling as a result of the buffer zone which was created. There was a buffer zone created in Hot Springs as well. Again, there was an effort at ensuring that sides went back. So, and you know, there was no conflict over there. So now, what I can show you, now that we've actually gone through all of this, are actual satellite images of the situation as it developed after the Galwan clashes and, you know, just how bad it actually began. So let's start with the first set of satellite images, and what you see on your screen now is the north bank of the Pangong Lake, where at a certain stage in June 2020, the Chinese in an area which India claimed actually put a marking of the flag of China, and they wrote in Mandarin that this area belonged to them. And you know, this was a time when the Chinese had come right in on the north bank. Let's keep moving to the next image of the same area. This is also the north bank of the Pangong Lake, and these were all structures which the Chinese had actually built up over here in the north bank. What I'm showing you are the images of the north bank of Pangong and the south bank. Now, again, there were places where the Chinese had their boats. They had brought them forward from their original positions. But then as a result of the deconflicting process and the creation of buffer zones, a lot of these areas were vacated as well. So this is again from June 2020. Let's keep moving the images to the next set of images. So let's go and take a look at where it all actually started, the Galwan Valley, and where the clashes took place. The Chinese built multiple structures right on the edge of the, along the river, near where the river takes a bend. The line of actual control, according to Indian estimates, was further south. As you go across this bend, approximately 400 meters is where we would typically patrol in the past. The Chinese blocked us from doing that, and they started creating all of these areas, and areas which we said was ours. And the clashes took place in all of these areas over here, right? All of these areas going down over here. This is where soldiers from both sides lost their lives. So let's move to the next set of images that we have. This is an area, Hot Springs. It's not really spoken about, very, very important. A lot of these areas, remember, had seen actual conflict in 1962 as well. So there was disengagement which took place. It took place in September 2022. This was a structure in August 2021 which existed, a Chinese area, but then the Chinese also moved back. And so as you can see, they vacated this entire area and this building was moved back. Again, let's take a look at some of the other areas that we are talking about. Move to the next set of images if we can, so that we can get a clearer idea of, so again, this Gogra Hot Springs area. This was the relocated Chinese base. The base which I said had moved south, it moved south approximately 3 kilometers further south. Let's go to the next image, if we can. Right, so that's this is where the Chinese base was removed. It was moved further south, and this was part of a buffer zone which was created in this particular area. Let's continue moving now to the next set of areas. What you see over here is Depsang, and this is the area which is a real concern, because as I understand it, in a particular place called the Y Junction, Depsang, right in the north of Ladakh, is where Indian soldiers have been prevented from moving in this direction east to our old patrol routes by the presence of these Chinese soldiers. If these Chinese soldiers move away from here, then India can get to our patrol routes. There's only one image of Depsang which has emerged, and this shows this Chinese presence. Hopefully a big agreement will have been arrived at which affects and improves India's patrolling prospects in this area. So there you have it, a quick look at what the overall situation is. Let's just go quickly across now to Ambassador Phunchok Stopdan, who's an expert in all of this, General Ashok Kumar and Dr. Sriparna Pathak. Thank you very much for being with us. Ambassador Stopdan, let me come to you first. Are you optimistic that this can be the start of a lasting peace between India and China?
Well, we can only hope because we have very limited information so far. I'm sure in the next 2-3 days more details will come out. But as of now, it's just an agreement on patrolling. Now, patrolling is a very difficult word. It's an aggressive word. What do you mean by patrolling? Aggressive patrolling or benign patrolling? We really do not know. And patrolling without disengagement is a very difficult proposition. If the troops are deployed, how do you patrol? You mean to say that we sleep in the night and the Chinese patrol, or the Chinese sleep in the night and we patrol? Those things are not known. The periodicity, the frequency, the numbers. I'm sure there's some modification in the CBMs that existed before 2020. Some new changes may have occurred. But I am in Ladakh right now, and I don't get the impression that things will really change. And the kind of information that is coming from Beijing, they are underplaying this new development. Of course, at the highest level, you see President Xi endorsing all these things. But the experts in Beijing and Shanghai says, well, this is okay, but it depends on India how India navigates this thing, whether they will open up trade, investment, and all that thing. So a lot of contingents attached to it. I also see that our goal is to have peace and tranquility at the border, but the Chinese want to have changes and the improvement in the bilateral relationship. There is a huge expectation differences. So I don't know. Let's see how it goes in the future.
All right.
In the next step.
All right. General Ashok Kumar, a gigantic step forward, or one do you believe that needs to be taken, if not with a grain of salt, but our approach needs to be cautious. Let's not see this as being a genuine beginning to genuine disengagement. That's still a long way away.
Thank you, Som. I must make three opening statements. Firstly, this development is definitely very, very positive. It has come after 4 years of hard negotiations. I'm sure there would have been much more dialogue and discussions between both the countries than what is made out to be in the open domain. Now, having expressed that kind of optimism, there are certain details, as highlighted by the previous speaker, is yet not known. Whether we are going to finish the concept of buffers and we are going to revert back to pre-April-May 2020 position, or we are going to continue maintaining those buffers and only retaining the patrolling. Some details patrolling have also started coming in terms of the size of patrol, in terms of frequency, in terms of informing each other. But the third point which I want to make is the main challenge is going to be, once we get the final details, how the militaries on both sides are going to implement. And one will be of the cautious optimism, given the kind of activities which China has been doing, whether in 1962, 1967, 1987, 2017, and finally in 2020. So therefore, we cannot keep our guard off. And despite patrolling having commenced, there are a large number of activities to go back to April-May 2020 positions. The dismantling of infrastructures which were come up after that time, withdrawal of troops from both sides, which are more than 50,000 on both sides. A large number of structures have come which have got the war waging potential. What happens to them? So I think it will require a deliberate and cautious approach. And despite the desire of both the countries to go forward on all counts, I think Indian military and Indian establishment has to remain cautious, vigilant, and prepared should such a condition repeat again in future.
Okay. Sripadna, let's just look at a couple of areas. Right to the north is Depsang, right to the south is Demchok. How have these been some of the most contentious areas?
Well, these have been the most contentious areas, and as the previous speakers also mentioned, this is just about patrolling. These were the last two areas which remained, and the discussions had to be there. But it's not like this is the last of it. I think the previous speakers have also spoken about it. One thing I wanted to quickly weigh in is the usage of words. First, the usage of words by Prime Minister Modi. He spoke about mutual sensitivity, and it's been a key phrase which India has used vis-a-vis China in the recent years in the three mutuals formulation. It's a very pretty tough message delivered in a language in key, Prime Minister Modi style. So he's talked about the three mutuals, which means that there is a lack of distrust, which is why we understand that things which happened in the past at Depsang and Demchok can very well happen again. We are not dismantling all the border infrastructure that we have put into place. Second, is China really talking about this as an agreement? China took a lot of hours to actually mention this agreement, but they have just confirmed that they have reached a solution, would work with India to effectively implement the plan. They've not called it an agreement on patrolling, which means that we still have to hold back on rejoicing it. It's not yet time to rejoice. And it definitely does not mention complete disengagement. So it's been like 3 steps forward and maybe 1 step backward. So disengagement hasn't happened. There's still, whatever salami slicing that China has tried to, that we still need to talk about it, and we need to still figure that out. Those are my views on this.
All right, I'm just going to go back to Ambassador Punchok Stopdan. In fact, can we just have the map up for a moment and then come to pictures of the north bank of Pangong? If you just get the map up for a moment, this is the area that we're talking about over here. And just very broadly speaking, there is a big gap between India's claims and the Chinese claims. India, of course, claims all the way up. This is finger 4 to finger 8 approximately over here. The Chinese come all the way and claim up to approximately finger 3. So this is the area where there was this buffer zone which was created. But obviously India would now be able to patrol east much more. I mean, that's what we are led to believe. So Ambassador Stopdan, how do we know that Indian and Chinese soldiers won't get into potential confrontational situations again? Because if there are patrols which come in from either side, we've had banner drills and the like, but do you believe that there is so much confidence now that tensions could be kept under check?
Yeah, because there's no settlement. The Chinese have not vacated their claims. They're just saying, okay, you patrol it, we will find some new solution for patrolling, but they have not given up those territories. They can always come back. So the patrolling is a very sensitive issue. We really don't know the details of the patrolling. As the previous speakers have said, there are so many things. It's a military thing. It's not a diplomatic talking issue. So the patrolling itself is a major terminology, and therefore we need to understand what does it mean from the Chinese point of view, what does it mean from our perspective. So we ignore each other, or sometimes we do that. Obviously, the arrangement before 2020 was that we ignored each other. Some places we didn't even go. Some places, okay, the Chinese will go back. They come and they throw something, but they will go back. But then they had a very sustained strategy for slicing. So one cannot really think, and I don't believe that there's something like trust has to be built. There's nothing called trust in international relationship. It's only about interest. We have to guard our interests. That's the whole issue. My sense is that there is a tremendous amount of international pressure, as the statement came from both leaders. They gave too much importance to international, context, the global issues. So they want to be seen as responsible countries, leaders for global peace and stability. And I think that was more critical than the border itself. Really, I think the Chinese have in the last 4 years scored certain military points, and they also scored some strategic points at the global level. Our achievement is a diplomacy. I think it's a very, very mature diplomacy we displayed, and through which we have scored some points. But I think the achievement is more on the Chinese side, because they have exhausted us to a certain extent. We had to spend a lot of money to sustain this conflict in Eastern Ladakh for the last 4 years. It's a huge cost. And I can understand, I see the number of convoys and the air activities Delhi goes on. I don't know how much money we are spending on all these things, thousands of crores every day. I'm sure there's some kind of a pressure which has put on us. Therefore, I think it's a compulsion on both sides. The Chinese have their own problem. The Chinese have a huge problem in Taiwan and South China Sea and many issues with the United States. So I'm sure it's a compromise. It's a situation where they have to do something.
All right, Ambassador,
They can't
hold
be,
your thought for a second. Let me go back to General Kumar. General Kumar, this is actually on the north bank of Pangong, and all of these red structures were actually shelters, for their military, which they formed in areas, and they came into this area in huge numbers, right? And ultimately, when there was that buffer zone which was formed, you can go to the next image, they started going back. So let's go to the next image. I'll just talk about that a little bit more before I come across to my question. These were areas, at a certain stage that brought up, piers for boats and things. But then ultimately they started, this is finger 3, they started actually wrapping up whatever they had and they started moving away. This is when there was that buffer zone which was created. But how do you actually look, General, at patrolling in these areas? Because at one level, none of the issues have really been resolved. We've just chosen to go back to 2020 in that scenario. So a win-win in that sense. But do you believe the issue of patrolling will continue to be, potentially a matter of concern?
Vishnu, as far as Pangokso Lake Northern Bank is concerned, there are 3 major aspects which we need to see. Before this April-May 2020 standoff, the claim line from Chinese side was somewhere going around finger 3.
Yes.
And at places at times they used to also mention finger 4, but not beyond that.
Right.
Our physical occupation was also there in near finger 3, but our claim point was to finger 8.
Yes.
But once this time this transgression took place, they shifted their claim line even beyond their 1959 claim line and claimed that it goes around finger 2. So that the claim line itself has undergone a major change as per their stated statements given earlier, formally and informally. Second thing, the disengagement from north bank of Pangokso Lake did not come just like that and just based on the mutual negotiation. I'm sure you will agree that once India launched operations and captured Kailas heights, Kailas ranges, it was a fallout of that they agreed to go back to the respective positions. But in the process, they also created this concept of buffer zones, which happened between finger 4 and finger 8. That will not be patrolled and probably that will be keeping the forces, away from each other as against facing directly to each other. While concept of buffer state per se is not bad till the time it is a temporary measure. But largely it was coming in the claim area of India and not, so much in other areas. If you go to Hot Spring, Gogra, Galwan in the Chinese area.
Right.
So that way we were at a little disadvantageous position. Now,
anyway, let's see what finally happens, General, going forward. There is a sense of anticipation this time around. I'm running short of time over here. I'd like to thank you all very much